really like Monster Hunter. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I've played every Monster Hunter title ever, because I haven't, but I have put a considerable amount of time into the new gen games. Across all the consoles and Steam, I've got about 300 hours combined, so it's definitely safe to say that I don't have anything better to do with my time. Needless to say, during the Game Awards when the Wild trailer dropped, I nearly passed out. A year and some change later, and here we are. The game is out and everyone is loving it. Except for Monster Hunter fans. Yeah, believe it or not, a new entry in a beloved franchise is a little controversial. Opening weekend, two friends and I blitzed through the low rank campaign, and now that we wrapped up the high rank, I'm confident I've seen enough about this game to have an informed opinion. And since I'm gonna be sinking about 80 more hours into it before I get tired of it, I figured there isn't a better excuse to talk about it with you guys. Is Wilds any good? Is this a worthy successor to World and Rise? Is the game too easy? We'll talk about it all, so let's jump straight in and find out what makes Monster Hunter Wilds such an incredible experience. To be completely honest, I'm not really certain how I should talk about an experience as massive as Monster Hunter Wilds. There's a metric ton in here, so it only makes sense to break it up a little bit and talk about it in chunks. I'll try to keep it pretty spoiler free, but you might catch a monster's moveset through my footage, so just be wary of that. Also, just for transparency's sake, I'll tell you that the footage in this video was recorded by myself and my good friend Lazo. It's important to note because the entire time we were playing cross-platform and ended up recording most of it. My footage is recorded on PS5 and his is recorded on PC. Neither of us had any issues running the game or with connecting online, but I don't care to get into PC specs or measure ping dicks here. I haven't really been hearing about people having issues running the game, but I don't know your setup, so I'm not going to make that promise. All I can say is that the game ran pretty well for me. Talking about the game itself is going to be a bit of a hassle just because it's so new, so I'm going to avoid talking about the story for as long as I can. Instead, we're going to start with what we're all really here for, the monster hunting. Ah, fuck, I'm going to be my character first? Why are there so many options? Alright, hold on, this might take me a minute. While I'm working on that, let's talk about something that's just as important as the monsters. The exploration. Just like World, Wilds boasts an incredibly vibrant and rich environment for you to explore and hunt monsters in. Typically, I don't like open world games since the maps tend to be big just for the sake of being big. However, the team at Capcom managed to make each area feel like they're packed to bursting with life and interesting finds, and of course, the game looks gorgeous. Throughout the game, you'll hunt monsters across 5 different areas, all with unique weather patterns that completely change the feel and experience of each hunt. For the 40-ish hours I've had my hands on the game so far, the Windward Plains and Scarlet Forests are my favorites, but the Oyawell Basin, Ice Shard Cliffs, and Ruins of Wyveria have definitely been growing on me. The Windward Plains feel absolutely massive, and chasing down a monster across the sand dunes will never not be awesome. Instead of putting random creatures everywhere, in this area the devs opted to put scattered but dense pockets of life, which is how it tends to work out in real life. Despite the fact that it's the most open area in the game, there are a ton of neat little spots to check out, and the devs did a great job of finding that balance. On the opposite end of that spectrum is the Scarlet Forest, where there is shit everywhere. Who would have guessed? There's a lot of stuff in the rainforest. Surprisingly though, this area ran really well. Granted, I'm playing on console, so it better run the game properly, but I never experienced any slowdown or issues here. It might sound like that's the bare minimum, and to be fair, it kind of is, but there is shit everywhere. Bugs, leaves, water, monkeys, Ewoks. If you can think of it, it's probably in there somewhere. The Oyawell Basin is probably my least favorite area so far. It's fine. It's just gray. Like, really gray, unless you happen to be there when everything is on fire. Some of the arenas you fight in during the low rank campaign are pretty interesting, but otherwise this area is a bit whatever-ish for me. It's basically the same for the Ice Shard Cliffs too. It's interesting, but I never really felt inclined to stay and poke around outside of beaming straight for the monster that I'm hunting. And if it's in that region, it's probably here at Bombi, in which case I don't want to be there anyway. The final area, which I won't explain too much for spoiler reasons, falls into the same issue for me. Everything feels a little samey, so when I'm hunting, I'm basically super tuned into the monster and nothing else. Visually, it's good enough, and there are some cool spots I vaguely remember, but other than the final arena for the Arkveld fight and the final fight, nothing's coming to mind right now. Finally, it's been like 30 minutes. I finished my hunter, guys. Now we can get started with the real game and talk about the monsters.
Meow.
God damn it, I have to customize the cat! I just want to hunt! When it comes to exploration in video games, the map is only a piece of the puzzle. The other, and arguably more important piece, is how you get around it. In most Monster Hunter games, you've kind of just gotta hoof it to wherever you need to go. However, in Rise, the developers decided to add in palamutes. They were basically dog-shaped dirt bikes, and honestly, I thought they were pretty cool. They supported you in battle, you could give them cute little armor sets, and you could drift? Wilds decided to take these guys and make them much more useful. These are the Sacred, Secret? I don't know, pronounce it however you want. The Sacred are mounts that can pretty much do it all, so long as all you want to do is go from point A to point B. Unfortunately though, this isn't without its negatives, but this might take a second to explain. In Monster Hunter games, you have to hunt monsters. Okay, I know that sounds obvious. In Monster Hunter games, you have to hunt the monsters, but that's a process. In Monster Hunter World, they introduced scout flies to help you do just that. After gathering enough evidence of a monster's existence, whether it be claw marks, mucus, or hair on the floor, the scout flies can hone in on where the monster is and lead you to it. Once you research a monster enough, you'll be able to just select it from the map and track it automatically, but you'll still have to chase the thing down yourself. Wilds lets the player take a couple steps back from this process, however, because on top of the scout flies, you're also riding a feathered bloodhound. Without spoiling anything too crazy, the main mission structure for the campaign is you and your crew exploring a new environment and running into a new monster. And then you just gotta fight the bitch right there. You don't really need to investigate because you've already found the monster, and once the Sacred has its scent, there isn't a chance it'll escape you. Additionally, and this may not be the case if you play mouse and keyboard, but by pressing up on the D-pad, you'll not only mount the Sacred, you'll begin automatically moving towards whatever unlucky bastard you want to make a jacket out of. While the Sacred are a good idea in concept, in execution they've kind of become one of my bigger issues with the game. Because mounting would automatically lurch me towards my next target at top speeds, I wasn't really recognizing or committing any of the maps to memory, and that's one of the things I enjoy most about these games. When I jumped back in to grab footage of the palamutes, I still remembered the map layouts of Rise, and I haven't played that game in months. The Sacred was getting me through the game almost too efficiently, if that makes any sense. Around the time my friends and I made it to the Scarlet Forest, I decided to swear off using the mount until we found the monster the first time, so I could find some of the hidden stuff that the devs put in every corner. When I did that, I noticed immediately that I was enjoying the game more. For example, when you walk out of the base camp in the forest, there's a tree that has an army of ants marching down it. If you wait just a second, you're able to interact with them with your grappler, and doing so just gives you a free mega potion. The thing is, if you ride away in your Sacred straight to the boss fight every time, you'll miss it practically no matter what. This isn't even my only example. Because my friends and I are simply elite gamers, we'd hunt the monster pretty quickly so it wouldn't have the chance to run away as much. There were certain parts of the map that we just didn't touch until our 10th or 12th hunt in the area, by sheer luck. I guess unluck? Yeah, unluck. That's why I didn't really notice the colossal cave structures under the Oilwell Basin. As far as I can remember, most of the story hunts are in the higher levels of the map, so until high rank, I literally just hadn't gone down there. I'd say that once you're in the fight, using the auto move is fine, especially when the monster's transferring areas, but I honestly really encourage you to just walk when you have the chance. You'll find stuff everywhere. You'll find useful stuff everywhere. All right, I've got my hunter, I've got my dumbass cat. Let's finally talk about hunting some monsters. I'm the kind of guy that says monster reveals count as spoilers for these games, so if you're like me, you might want to save this video for later and come back to it after you've played the game. However, rest assured, the monsters in this game are fucking awesome. Wilds brought along a healthy 13 new monsters to the franchise, and I'm a fan of pretty much all of them. My personal favorite is the Uthduna, but quite frankly, Raid Owl is not beating the coolest monster allegations. Their fights may, in fact, have been the greatest things ever. All of the fights felt pretty balanced throughout the campaign, if maybe a little easy? The thing is, like I said earlier, my friends and I are elite gamers, and we did the entire campaign together, so my perception of difficulty may be just a little skewed. The monsters' attack patterns all felt pretty unique, and I felt they did a good job of mixing in some complex movements while giving me just enough time to breathe and gather my bearings. We hardly fainted, but that doesn't mean the fights were free or anything.
Oh, careful.
Oh shit, Andre?
Yeah.
No, Andre.
I was just.
That's our first death of this entire playthrough, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just straight not paying attention.
Hey, way to go, Jack.
Yeah, I know, right?
However, something I've felt is always a little underappreciated is the monsters' design themselves. They look absolutely fantastic. I don't think anyone's denying that. But on a much deeper level, they feel like they're a real part of the environment that they live in. Unfortunately though, I don't think I'm qualified enough to talk about that sort of thing. So it really is a shame that I don't know someone who's an ornithology and paleontology researcher that also really loves Monster Hunter. Oh, wait!
I think, genuinely speaking, people are sleeping on Indian food.
This is Driptosaurus. Some of you might recognize him from his series on TikTok where he's been dissecting various monsters from wilds and seeing what makes them tick. He's a pretty radical dude, so I decided to ask him a couple questions about the game and his thoughts on it. Before we get started, do you want me to call you Driptosaurus? Do you have like a different online name you want to go by here?
You can call me Drip. That's usually what people abbreviate my name to in like conversation.
Okay. Can I call you Tosaurus, actually?
You can do that if you want. I'll respond to whatever. So I go by Driptosaurus. I'm a science communicator and a Monster Hunter content creator on TikTok and YouTube. I've been working on a series recently where I created like detailed field notes on the life in Monster Hunter Wilds, not just including the large monsters, but all the little guys. And that's been going on for a relatively short time. It kind of just blew up recently. And yeah, so I'm a huge Monster Hunter fan, and like I said, I'm a science communicator and a researcher, so yeah.
Generally speaking, for Wilds, what's your impression of the game so far?
Really, really amazing time with the game so far. I have spent probably 17 or 18 or even 19 pages of full notes that I've taken on Wilds so far. It's loads and loads of fun, and it is a step up from the other games that I've played in a lot of ways that I really deeply cared about, and I was worried that they wouldn't get pushed in sort of those directions because, you know, not everybody has my priorities in mind, obviously, but I'm glad to see that the things that I really hoped would change from you know, World and the earlier games absolutely were changed. So I would say the thing that really got me, I actually have a convenient illustration of, because I've been working on it. So this is my sketch page for Uthduna so far. And you can see here, it's got these protrusive jaws, just like a lot of predatory fish do. But the thing is, Uthduna doesn't just take stuff from the surface of the water, it also chases after fish in the water column. So it'll pursue like Gajau and the other large fish when it's swimming in those big water areas. And as an adaptation for that, because it has this head shape that is very typical of a predator that would take prey from the top of the water, like bugs or even birds, if you're looking at something as big as like an arapaima. But it also has these little grooves in front of its eyes, like a pike. And pike have those grooves so they can basically have like a sight line onto whatever fish is in front of them and they're chasing after. And so I think it's super cool that Uthduna has these like kind of hybrid features of big fish that eat stuff from the surface of the water and big fish that eat stuff like right in front of them, like pike, barracuda, that sort of thing. And it makes for a really convincing design for an animal that hunts both from underwater and from the surface as it moves around on land. So I think that's super cool, very subtle. And I also really like how Raydao has a modeled electrical organ in its tail, and when you cut the tail, you can see the electrical organ in the tail, the main organ, glow and change color as it charges up, which is so cool that they did that
for no reason. It's so cool. He's not beating the allegations. He's just
Raydao's awesome. Yeah, Wilds has a roster of just absolute smash hit monster designs. I can't think of one that doesn't excel in at least one area compared to like the rest of the Monster Hunter franchise. And it's a series of great game design. The fact that the Wilds roster, basically every monster in Wilds has something that it does just above and beyond is super amazing to me. And so I have to say that with Wilds, at least, I expect them to have taken a lot longer designing each of these individual monsters and envisioning how they fit into their ecosystem.
Would you say that this level of detail in the monster design is the same for like World, or is there like a dramatic increase in the skill and detail?
It's much better than World. Like you have, the monsters interact with their ecosystems in so much more of like a fluid way. I said this immediately upon like playing just the beta of Wilds. Going back to World from this is like going to a zoo after you've like been out actually in like a field expedition and seeing how animals interact. Because in World, it's convincing, but it's very on rails in the way that they interact with their environment. So like Rathalos will come to the same spot and usually kill the same Aptonoth for its feeding cycle. Zinogre will go to the same spot to howl every night. But in Wilds, All that stuff is kind of modulated by weather conditions and the dispersal patterns of the animal's prey. Ray Dow won't hunt from the same Ceratinoth herd every time it kills. There won't be a scripted Gagios that kills the one Dalthodon in the Windward Plains. There's a lot of places where this stuff really kind of emerges spontaneously in a way that's very convincing and very representative of real ecosystems. There are certainly cycles within ecosystems, just like the weather cycles in wilds, but there's also a lot of simulated chaos, which is super cool to see. And I think that's the major step up from World, is that the game is so much less predictable in terms of the monster's area-to-area movement and their behavioral patterns and stuff. It's really cool to see.
Before I forget to ask, I know I'm getting to the lower end of my list. Before I forget to ask, what weapons are you running?
Oh, that is a great question. I picked
Make
up
it a break in time, dude.
Yeah, I've picked up more weapons in Wilds than I have in any other game previously. I'm still diehard Greatsword main.
Yes!
I love the Greatsword.
Fire.
It's amazing. It's basically
the best weapon.
It's my giant scalpel. It's the same thing that I use the Greatsword for in Wilds is, what I use on the collected birds we have in the lab when I'm, dissecting them and trying to get good information on their internal anatomy. The Greatsword is perfect for that because you can break a lot of parts with it. I have a part breaker Greatsword build that I use just for getting information, where because the internal parts of these monsters are modeled with an incredible amount of accuracy. If you look at the inside of Ray Dow's bolt horns, when you break them, you can actually see this. I don't know how well it is modeled, but
Jesus Christ.
You can break the bolt horn open. And you can see the partitioning of there's 3 electric organs. And I didn't really work out which one of these are the main electric organs and which one is maybe an extension of the Sachs electric organ, which is an organ in electric eels that regulates the other electric organs. And you can see it on Ray Dow's neck very prominently. But that sort of thing, that's the main reason why I've been using part breaker Greatsword in Wilds. But I've been playing a lot of Charge Blade, a lot of Gun Lance, a lot of Switch Axe, surprisingly. I used to not enjoy the Switch Axe that much, but in Wilds it's really awesome. Oh, there's actually one more thing. In the future, for any of your fans and also some of mine, I don't know if they're watching this, but I will be uploading a series of lectures on my YouTube that are, a little bit more formatted than the TikTok videos, that are focusing more on the diversity of each ecosystem as opposed to just individual species, where I'm going over the trophic levels and the way that those ecosystems function in more of a teaching focused way. So I think probably I just want to put emphasis on the ability of this game to really teach people about ecology and those basic biological and ecological concepts in a very functional way. Because I'm big into using games and media to do science communication. So if you're listening or watching, I hope that you check that out.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Shit, that sounds awesome.
Thank you.
The other part of combat is the one that's most subjective, and that's the part regarding the player. Wilds brought out some pretty unique changes to the combat system, but like everything else in this game, it's kind of a point of contention in the community. The one that's the biggest deal is being able to carry more than one weapon into combat. Once you get far enough into the game, maybe an hour and some change in, you unlock the ability to store a weapon on your Sacred that you can swap to anytime you're mounted. This completely changes the flow of combat if you're using it efficiently, and by and large, it's a good idea. If you're playing solo, it opens up the possibilities for some truly crazy stuff. If you run into an encounter with a Greatsword and find the monsters outmaneuvering you, you can keep a weapon like the Dual Blades or Insect Glaive to keep up. If you're confident you'll hit your 2 charge slashes next time for real though, you can buff yourself with the Hunting Horn and flip back to the Greatsword. The possibilities are really endless, especially once you add other players into the mix for a new party composition. During my playthrough, I tended to run Greatsword and Hammer, just in case I needed to break off a part or create a wound before going in for some real damage. I think it's a winning strat, but I've missed my fair share of slashes and swings, so maybe I'm just Stockholmed into liking the big weapons. Clever transition, let's talk about wounds. They work, but it might be a little too good. By attacking the same spot enough times with a slashing weapon, you'll create a red spot on the monster called a wound. Then, if you enter focus mode and attack, you'll do an extra flashy move and destroy the wound, deal a hefty chunk of damage, sometimes stun the monster, and get a common drop. What wounds add to combat, especially multiplayer combat, is great. So there's an excellent video essay that talks about why Monster Hunter weapons are all satisfying in their own way, and you should definitely go watch it. But the TLDR is that each weapon type has a different goal that they work towards. If I'm using the hammer, my goal is to concuss the monster hard enough that it falls over and I can capitalize on it. But if my friend Jack is playing Insect Glaive, his goal is to jump around and do no damage. Our goal is still to take down the monster, but we have separate smaller goals to shoot for along the way. What the wounds do is give everyone a small goal to shoot for, and since every weapon class can capitalize on it, it's not a wasted effort work for different playstyles. While it's nice that breaking the wounds drops a common material, I can't help but feel that making it a chance of a drop would have been the better move. It's already a good addition to the combat system just for the extra damage and stun, and if getting a drop were an occasional treat as opposed to a guarantee, it would make it much more special. I promise I don't need the guarantee of a 30th Doshiguma hide. I'm gonna hit the wound anyway, it looks cool. The much better addition in my eyes are offset attacks and power clashes. If you're using a heavier weapon and you time your strikes correctly, you'll either completely knock the monster off balance and force a down state, or you'll clash with it and hold it long enough for your crew to take advantage of the situation. They're incredibly satisfying to pull off, to the point where I'll go fishing for them and get a little too greedy.
Oh my god, thank you!
Just quickly before we move on to the equipment stuff, I want to shout out a couple quality of life changes that I think are really awesome. The optimal health and status recovery wheels are God's greatest gift to Monster Hunter players. Whoever had the idea to implement this honestly deserves some unimaginable head. Pop-up camps are also pretty neato, but I wish they were a little more costly to implement. I like that they can be destroyed by monsters that are just out and about, but you just have to talk to a dude and spend a couple points to fix them. In my perfect world, it would take some material that you actually have to go out and gather, and if it's destroyed, I want to have to go to where it was to have to start the repair process. The other major part of being a hunter is creating your own equipment, and this system is largely unchanged. The armor system is exactly what you'd expect from Monster Hunter. There's some standout designs in the pack, but I definitely have a couple I wouldn't touch if you paid me to. I normally don't like reused armor, but the classic armors that return have new twists because of lore stuff, so they still feel kind of fresh. Like leftovers from last night instead of leftovers from 3 years ago. One of the best changes in the armor though was the expansion of layered armor. Once you craft high rank armor, you can use it as layered gear and change the color palette around to make your perfect look. This is Monster Hunter Dress to Impress after all. I'll be completely honest, I didn't really need to engage with the armor systems too much throughout my playthrough. I ended up using Doshiguma armor for most of it, and I switched to Arcveld set for the very last fight. Presuming I'm just the GOAT, you might have to use armor a little more than I did, but otherwise you can just dodge, block, and parry, pussy. The weapons are also just about the same, except for the major addition of the Ardian weapon system. Once you hit high rank, you can begin hunting a new monster type called Tempered Monsters. They're a decent amount stronger than their non-tempered counterparts, and when they're killed, they give you weapon shards which can be used to make custom weapons. These weapons are pretty good, like really good, and learning how the customization works really isn't too difficult. I'm sure there's a lot that the system can do, but honestly, I'm kind of avoiding it. I much prefer the weapon tree crafting as opposed to the custom weapon making. It's more rewarding to go through several hunts with a particular goal in mind instead of farming random tempered monsters for the parts to craft your golden weapon. I'm glad it's there for the people who are gonna use it, but I'll probably just stick to monster grinding. Plus, the monster weapons look way cooler. I've spent enough time tiptoeing around it, so let's talk about the actual story of the game. Just like the other recent Monster Hunter titles, it's fine. To be a little blunt, it's not anything particularly groundbreaking or revolutionary, not by any means. However, it was more than enough to keep me invested in what was going on. During an expedition eastward, the Hunter Guild finds a young boy named Nada, who claims to be from the Forbidden Lands. He says his people were killed by the White Wraith, and since the Forbidden Lands were previously thought to be uninhabited, the reasons for investigating seem to just keep stacking up. You and your cat have been selected by the guild to be Nada's guardian as you explore the wilds and search for what destroyed Nada's home and why. This is A-okay. At least it's interesting enough to keep me from scrolling on TikTok while I was waiting for the next monster to show up. Whenever I was watching a cutscene though, I was just itching to get back to the game because I really wanted to play the game. I'm not certain whether that was because the story was a little uninteresting or because the gameplay was absolutely addictive, but if I had to guess, it was leaning towards the latter. Despite the fact that I didn't want to watch them, a lot of the cutscenes were really cool, and if hearing the guild has authorized you to hunt X monster doesn't get you rock hard, you might need to contact a doctor. Or maybe I need to contact a doctor? Either way, a doctor's getting contacted promptly. The game gives you a handful of characters that travel from area to area with you. And while none of them are the bee's knees, they did enough to do. And while none of them are the bee's knees, they did a good enough job to endear me to them. Alma is a really great handler. She feels like a more mature version of the character from World, and thankfully, doesn't fuck up every possible encounter that she's in. She's just kind of cool, and she feels like a real character instead of a glorified quest board. Gemma's a cool enough character. I'm really glad they picked someone interesting to be the Smithy. It was also a really good idea to make the Smithy travel with your group, because it gives us more time to get invested in the character instead of getting a new Smithy at every area, or locking equipment management to the Windward Plains. Olivia is always a treat to hunt with, nothing really groundbreaking to say about her, but I enjoyed having her on the team. And finally, there's Nada, who's fine. He's kind of just fine. It's a shame that I don't have more to say about the character who's the most relevant to the plot, but what can you do? He gets some cool stuff near the end of the story, but most of the time he's kind of just worried about making it back home, and that's okay. Weirdly enough, the character I had the hardest time getting used to was a player character having real dialogue and conversations. It's like when they started making the LEGO games with actual dialogue instead of the normal rah, rah, rah. Unfortunately though, the campaign isn't without its issues. Of the new generation of games, it's definitely the most linear, and that's kind of a shame. Rise struck a really great balance with its progression, where you would need to complete a certain number of hunts at your rank before you get a promotion hunt, which grants you access to more intense missions. There was some real wiggle room with the quests you could complete, so if a monster just wasn't worth the trouble at that point, you could skip it and come back to it later. This is a really good progression loop, because it gives you a structure that forces you to improve at a consistent pace while giving you enough freedom to approach it in the way that works best for you. I think that's why it's the most replayable of the modern titles, especially now that it has Daybreak. With Wilds, however, the progression works a little differently. You'll talk to Alma, or whatever NPC you need to start the quest, be guided to the area where you run into the monster while the characters talk about recent story events, encounter the monster, and then get authorized to hunt it. There isn't any variance from player experience to player experience, and I'm going to talk about the game loop in a second, but it's a bit of a shame if you ask me. The campaign is good, and this game has a lot more to say than Rise did, but the progression in Rise is genuinely addictive. Here, I'm invested, but I'm worried that on a replay, I'm not going to give a flying fuck about what's going on plot-wise. Finally, and admittedly, this is a strange gripe, the game is called Monster Hunter Wilds, but there are so many people out and about on this map. In every area except the last two, we encounter entire societies with incredible variance in culture. Where are the wilds at? I think I'm playing Monster Hunter culture anthropologist up in here. I've also seen people having trouble running the campaign with their friends, but we had a pretty seamless experience, so I'll tell you what we did. We'd go through the cutscenes and get to the point where we'd get the quest begin text, and then duck out and rejoin together through Alma. It'd be cool if there was a truly seamless setup, but this let us avoid a ton of the issues I've seen people talk about online, so I thought I'd share. Not to be that guy, but I'm pretty good at Monster Hunter. And I don't say that just to inflate me ego even further, but when you play a lot of Monster Hunter, you get a little good at Monster Hunter. In most sequels to a video game, the skills from one transfer to the other pretty well. If you're good at Mario Kart 8, chances are you're gonna soar once 9 comes out. Monster Hunter titles are really good at carrying player skill from one game to the other, but this creates a bit of an issue when it comes to establishing difficulty early in the game. The first Monster Hunter game you play can vary, of course, but the core experience is pretty much the same for everyone. You'll hunt through a couple monsters and rise through the hunter ranks until you encounter something that you just aren't quite ready for. You grind out some other monster that you can handle, make new equipment, and eventually make it past whatever you were stuck on. While you're learning the game, you're encouraged to try out different weapons, equipment setups, and tools, and learn what works best for you in each scenario. The real thing that you're grinding for is the skill, unless you really do just want to make some new boots. The incentive for grinding out a monster might be a new set of armor or weapon, but what I was personally after was the feeling of getting better and better each hunt. It makes you want to grow as a hunter, and that's why the early game loop works so well, especially when you're getting into it for the first time. Unfortunately though, this isn't the case for returning players. I've already learned how to use the tools optimally. I've already learned what situations I thrive in and how to get there. I already know how to hunt monsters. Sure, there are 13 new ones, but once you've got the fundamentals down with what is arguably the smoothest combat in the series, it's just a matter of finding where you can squeeze in the damage. Because I was running the story mode with 2 other experienced hunters, it was several hours before we encountered anything that posed a substantial threat to us. It makes sense that experienced players will inevitably claim the game is too easy, because all the time spent learning the previous games transfers over to Wilds beautifully. The game improved the combat and its systems so much that it just feels like we're playing an easier experience, but the hard stuff is just down the road. Just like with Rise and World, we'll eventually get a pretty hefty expansion for the game. Mark my words though, when the expansion drops, the only thing you're going to hear about it is that it's too difficult. No one complains about Monster Hunter more than Monster Hunter fans, though, I guess, so what are you gonna do? My experience as a hunter is going to be completely different from someone who's never played any of these games before. That's why the discourse in the community right now is so misleading to newcomers, and it happens every time a new game comes out. I just don't want someone who's new to the community to be turned off the game because while they may be struggling, everyone else is complaining that it's too easy. That being said, Wilds kind of addresses this too. In the story, you're an experienced hunter that's already made a name for yourself, and that works really well here. That is, unless this is your first Monster Hunter game, in which case you better get used to getting burnt, zapped, bruised, and shit on. Anywho, that's gonna be it for me today. If you enjoyed the video, you should definitely like and subscribe. I've got a couple more great videos in the works right now, and I'd hate for you to miss out on them. Did you guys enjoy Monster Hunter Wilds? What's your favorite new monster that got added? And of course, what weapon are you running? If you say Insect Glaive, I'm gonna make fun of you. Also, one last time, I just want to give a huge thank you to Driptosaurus for agreeing to be in this video. If you guys are at all interested in his content, I really recommend you go check it out. I will leave links in the description below. With all that being said, I'm Knightley. You've been absolutely incredible, and I'll see you relatively soon. Peace. I don't know if you guys know this, but if for some reason you have Reddit installed on your phone, and heaven forbid you have notifications on, it'll give you notifications for subreddits you're not in. And I keep getting posts from Monster Hunter Rage. I do not want to look at that subreddit ever again in my life. I hate that shit.